Dobrý večer, dámy a pánové.
Good evening,
Vítám
ladies
vás na
and
další
gentlemen.
diskusi
Welcome to
inspiračního fóra
another
Mezinárodního
debate
festivalu
within
dokumentárních filmů
the
Ji.hlava.
Inspiration Forum at the
Budu
Ji.hlava
toto
Documentary
diskuzní
Film
fórum
Festival.
dnes večer moderovat.
I will be the host for this evening, even though I am not a professional host. I engage in dance, I write about dancing, and I organize a series of projects. I've been interested in artists, their position, their social and economic status, and that is probably why I am here sitting today. The culture has evolved over the last decade. Many new events were organized, especially in cities. Those who were interested could also attend cultural events abroad. And so we witnessed the emergence of international cultural mobility. To use cultural services, however, is entirely different to creating or providing cultural services. I hope we will all, with our guests, agree on this particular point. Create culture means raise funds all the time, live in economic uncertainty, be applying for grants all the time, and sometimes enjoy the rare moments of appreciation. So culture, to put it simply, is for all the money. It is also the name of today's panel discussion. I will be interviewing 3 guests, or 2 to be precise, because the 3rd guest will be joining us in a moment. Now let me introduce the 2 first guests. We are having from Poland Gosia Plysa, the Executive Director of International Contemporary Music Festival UNSA, held since 2003 in Krakow. This festival is really interdisciplinary and international. When the festival is held, many accompanying events are held all over the globe. Gosia is also co-director of Unsound Productions, an agency representing special projects. She has been also involved in projects such as Shape Platform or We Are Europe. Welcome. The second guest, Barbora Baronová, literary documentarist, publisher, journalist, and media theoretician. She has her PhD in multimedia and design. She has written several highly acclaimed books, Unmarried Women, Women on Women, or Intimacy, to name just a few. And in 2012, she founded an independent art publishing house. Lately, her voice has been heard in her advocacy activities for women involvement in the literary circles. Talking about the notion of bibliodiversity, trying to involve more women in the publishing sector. We are now waiting for the third guest, who comes from a different background, completely different background. He works for several state-funded organizations. Jan Press, he has just connected. Welcome. He is director of the Moravian Gallery. He studied history and museum science in Brno and the School of Engineering in Brno too. He worked as a project manager for the Diocese of Brno, and since 2008 he has worked for the Moravian Gallery. In 2010 he became the head of the gallery. He cooperated on several projects, including the reconstruction of the Governor's Palace in Brno, for instance. So he has vast experience with management work. I would like to divide today's discussion into three distinct categories that are designed to cover the current situation impacted severely by the coronavirus, along with the tourism sector, for instance. Culture has been really hard and severely hit by the crisis. In the first round, I will ask you about the current situation of your organizations, that is to say, the Moravian Gallery, Women Publishing House, and Unsound Festival. What were your feelings? What was the situation like? I would also like to know what situation were your organizations in prior to the crisis. So who will be the first to answer? Take the floor, please. So I will give the floor to Bára, because she surely is well prepared to answer. Thank you very much for the invitation and the question. I will answer from my perspective, representing a small publisher. We publish about 3 books per year, and we had been in a healthy situation prior to the crisis. I had been preparing 3 books. The majority of publishing houses work in 3 or 2-year-long periods. When we earn money from the sales from previous years, we invest. So we really were in a healthy condition at the beginning of this year. We prepared 3 book projects. Then when the pandemic came, we faced it really well, because I tried to network throughout my career and surround myself with supporting communities, because I know that our projects are vulnerable because they are not that popular or well known. Since you mentioned the notion bibliodiversity, it is a notion I first came across when I studied my PhD, and I met one Australian publisher. And she explained to me how extremely important it is to create those different independent literary projects, so that literature doesn't become exclusively reserved for the powerful and the rich. It should also involve the handicapped or the oppressed, the marginalized. All these should have the possibility to project their attitudes in culture, in the literary circles. That is why I create books about senior women, for instance. I try always to fill those holes in culture, to publish different books, because I think this is the main mission of culture, not to follow just the mainstream line, but support also independent projects. Thanks to this community we had developed around us, we survived the crisis. Even though the situation was extremely demanding, festivals were annulled, discussions were not held, publishing houses had to close. But our strategy was really well done, because we work slowly, we focus on quality, we cooperate with supportive people, and that is why we survived. Now, during the second wave of the pandemic, I must express my gratitude for festivals that had been held. We participated in some of the last events that were held physically, and we realized how important physical contact contacts are for us. I was supposed to attend festivals in many Czech towns and cities. And this physical contact, physical presence is incredibly important for us because since we are a small entity, we need to see people in person. And this situation prevents us from being in physical contact and discuss about projects. So I must admit that I feel quite under pressure. I hoped we could organize some events. I hoped for the publishing houses not to have to close their doors, because these really are not overcrowded places, are they? People started wearing masks because many people know after the first pandemic that we need to wear masks in closed spaces. So I'm quite disappointed too, and I'm terrified about the future prospects because I don't really think in the foreseeable future shops will open again. And I also think the measures are quite incoherent. We realized, we learned a few days ago about the fact that many festivals are not going to be organized. That was not enough. So these decisions were really terrifying, and the worst thing about it is that we are not going to be eligible for funds and grants because many small entities are dependent on a combination of works and activities. So I think that closing shops for 2 months and preventing us from being physically present at events is not the best solution, and that it definitely should be taken into consideration. I just want to say that we are not just waiting for the money. We try really hard to earn all the funding we apply for.
For example, I had a colleague who, when everything closed down, she tried to open a small bookshop in Prague to at least have a space where she could sell books, and she could only have this bookshop open for 2 days, and now she isn't eligible for any form of support. So I am really curious to know what the result will be, and we are all active. We try our best. We are active on social media, but of course we cannot do miracles, and we cannot do events online that would appeal to so many people. So I'm really curious about the result. Thank you. We will get to this topic of mobilization of reserves. And now I would like to ask the same question to Gosia. Your festival last year took place in the physical form, and it was a very interesting experience. But this year you did it in the virtual form. How can you reflect on this, and what was your situation? What did it mean to you?
Hi. Thank you for the invitation. It was very interesting to hear Barbora's story about coming from a literature background. It's definitely different, and I guess also hard even harder for live music events. I think any event or any festival that depends on gathering a lot of people in one place and having people coming from all around the world is definitely hit hard. And I'm speaking for myself, but also many other colleagues who have been organizing smaller and bigger events that required booking artists that are coming from different places. So this definitely hasn't been possible. But prior to this edition, which we had to adapt to and organize this virtual event that I can talk about further, I can just shortly say that Unsound is a festival that focuses mainly on electronic, experimental, and independent music. So it's a festival that seeks for new types of music and often like looks for inspirations and artists in different parts of the world. And this has been something that we've been very interested in. So getting inspirations and finding interesting new voices in electronic experimental music, and also bringing them to Krakow or other places, and creating this very diverse bubble and creative meeting of lots of people. So I guess this form, we've been developing that for 17 years now as an organization, as a small independent organization. Since 2008, we operate as a not-for-profit. So as a organization, a foundation, I can feel, and I say it often, like this crisis has been really a huge drama for us, like for the rest of the world. But I feel like not-for-profits in some ways are kind of constantly in a crisis. So no matter which field you operate in, like this kind of organization based on a DIY culture and dependent on the often volunteer work, are kind of used to operating within crisis in terms of looking for funding and like making the projects happen. So in a way, we kind of prepare to that, to this always adapt of the mode of always adapting ourselves to the current reality. But so we've been doing the festival for 17 years. For the last few years, it's been slightly bigger than before, and it's mainly due to the support from the city council, but also being of Krakow, but also being part of various international networks. Also SHAPE, which is run by a Prague organization, Meat Factory. It's a network of 16 international festivals, mainly from Europe, but also working with other organizations from outside of Europe. So we've been, I feel like that networking and also being in the loop and in contact with other organizations have also helped us build Unsound to this kind of international form of a festival based in Krakow, with the main edition, which takes up to 8 days, as it did last year. And this year it took 11 days, but that was definitely a different format. Up until now, it was a festival with the main edition in Krakow, but also other editions in other places. It was known for doing stuff in New York, Australia, and also collaborating with partners from all around the world. So all of this mobility, accessibility, and the freedom of movement has been like a basis of Unsound. And I feel like the pandemic has really stopped it in March, when we were kind of faced with the reality where we are not able to meet with people in Krakow, and produce events safely in a variety of locations. And we had to make a call of, we didn't want to risk organizing an event knowing that very likely, normally organizing any event is super risky. Adding this extra layer, I felt like it would have been just too much. So we're fortunate enough to have secured the funding that we had to spend this year in a way. So, and also we wanted to sustain some part of our programming this year. So we have quickly made a choice to adapt to the format, to the online format, with our limited resources, but also to add different elements to the program. So our first book publication will be part of the program this year, which is coming up towards the end of November. We've announced it for 16th of November, but I'm pretty sure it will be delayed. And other than that, we also commission a compilation of new musical pieces. So I feel like, creativity and all of the things that were shaping our program so far has also helped us choose artists and partners that helped us build a program which is engaging, interesting, but also responds to the current crisis. I hope that this will not be the reality that the festival will remain in, and I really believe that we'll be able to organize safe events where we meet again. But at the same time, I feel like we could have discovered some solutions for enlarging the scope of the festival by organizing meetings like this. We've had lots of discussions with people connecting from different places, and I feel like this interconnectedness and availability of internet tools is something that will probably stay with us and help us grow the program in some other way. If to answer like whether our situation was stable or healthy in some way, I don't know if stability is something that's related to the form we operate in. So as a not-for-profit dependent on public funding, I think it's very hard to say that you can always predict what's going to happen. Like we've had our 3-year funding agreement with the city of Krakow, but yearly we also apply for other supports. So it's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen. And I'm not particularly looking optimistically into the future in terms of culture funding in Poland or Europe or in the world as such, because I feel like all of the countries are facing a massive recession that this pandemic will hit, has caused. So I feel that we probably will be facing some very difficult choices and downsizing rather than growing further. And I don't feel that many governments will make a call to support culture, even though that would be my personal choice and a solution to kind of lift up the mood or engage people, build countries like strength through focusing on culture and especially DIY culture. But usually that's just wishful thinking. So.
Thank you, Gosia. Our today's crisis, of course, has a very important place in our this year's diaries. And we need to face it in one way or another. We need to try to predict, be resourceful, maybe be optimistic in order to finally reach the better situation. Now I would like to give the floor to the director of the Moravian Gallery. He also represents another field in the artistic context and also another type of organization, because this is a state-funded organization. So let's see what his insights are. Maybe the situation is somehow unstable also in his organization. So I would like to ask you to comment on that. Good evening. I think that the words that were said today are really serious. I do agree that the pandemic has changed our lives and has changed the operation of our institutions. Speaking on behalf of an institution that tries to make art accessible to the public, this, of course, was a big change. There is a question, what actually is the sense of our organization if we cannot offer public or give the public access to art? There are projects that try to tackle this, to try to present art online. Projects that, for example, create virtual reality, or projects that show exhibitions that are taking place somewhere in a gallery and that cost a big amount of money but then were closed. But our mission as a gallery is not simply to show an exhibition online. Our mission is to give the public access to art. So I think that there is a big difference. And we are trying to find our way from this crisis. There are steps that we realized were important. Steps to be taken to join the international operation of these institutions. Some of us, some of the institutions, decided to be local and to be optimistic, and therefore we weren't really dependent on global major figures or on tourism, tourist mobility. So we still had our local communities. We had this community dimension of our work. We tried to focus on local audience and on Czech artists. And now we were facing a challenge because we needed to change our programs. We needed to really focus on Czech art, Czech artists, and this was an important step we took as a state-funded institution. So this helped us face the most difficult challenges. We decided to give a chance to contemporary designers. We had a collection and new acquisition from Czech designers. I think it was really successful because we bought a lot of art pieces from Czech designers, and also we showed that not only artists but also designers are now in a difficult situation. So this is our way of raising awareness and bringing attention to important issues our artists and designers are facing. And one of my colleagues mentioned the festival which was cancelled. It was Design Block, or it was the last festival which was not cancelled. And this was again an important moment which did happen, and it was actually an exhibition of diversity of creation. It was maybe also an example of what can be done, although the pandemic is coming. Of course, this year's edition of Design Block was not completely normal, but to some extent it was normal. However, there are changes happening in the society that are connected with the COVID pandemic. Thank you. I think it is important to understand that the pandemic put in danger a big variety of professions and jobs. Art curators, art theoreticians, artists, but also technical professions. For example, it is really difficult when you want to look for support. The Ministry of Culture actually realized that they cannot have full understanding of the cultural industry and of who and what jobs and what professions need support, and where the blows were most important. You mentioned that you are no longer able to meet your audience, and now we will show you a little survey we did, survey about culture and cultural spending, about audience who misses their cultural events, and often they mention culture among the first things they miss.
How much can you afford to spend on culture per month? Well, one thing is money, and the other is time. I can't afford to spend, I don't know, 2,000 Czech crowns per month. Since I work in culture, many things are free for me. I would say 1,000, 2,000 per month. I can't give you a precise sum, but if I want to see something, if I want to buy a book, I can afford it. 10% of my salary. I'm not able to give you a precise sum of money. I don't know, I would say 40% of my monthly costs. I think just about the same money as for food. Normally 500 or 1,000 per month. I don't think that I am limited by money. I think it's more about opportunities. I don't think I'm limited by money. I could be more culturally involved, but it's not because the lack of funds that I am not. So we are having a discussion about culture and shows that money is not the limiting factor. Let us now move to the second area concerning reserves and adaptation potential of the organizations you represent. I should like to know, what did you realize throughout the crisis? Because we hear often that a crisis is an opportunity. Could you identify additional sources of force within yourself that you weren't able to mobilize before? Did you start using new communication tools, maybe? Bara mentioned that she had to publish one book as an e-book, even though she hadn't wished to do so before the crisis. Did you have to do some things that you really didn't want to, but you were forced by the circumstances? This whole discussion is a little bit interactive, and your answers are longer. So please take the opportunity and answer also another question regarding the role of artists and creators in the current situation, because the basis of creation, after all, are creators and artists. They are the very basis, and they are also very vulnerable. And their existence is at stake now, actually. So you can take the floor according to your preferences. Tell us more about your reserves, new solutions, discoveries, and what is your perception of the artist's role in the current time. Take the floor if you want. I will do it. And I don't know where to begin, honestly. But since you mentioned the e-book, I have to say that I have started working with online tools much more. I have had a very long webinar on publishing online. I can handle it, but I have to say that it is really not the same. Being online and seeing people in person, I have been struggling with that because online is a solution for me. It is a way out, but I can't rely on it entirely. I published this book as an e-book because I needed money. I needed money to pay for my proofreaders because I had 3 more projects on the go, and I saw that many people lost their jobs in that time. So I decided to get the money and support the related professions by paying their remunerations. I also have to say that during the pandemic and now, what really helped me was my decision to continue working. I didn't stop because I have this long-term goal towards which I'm pursuing it. I keep focusing on my work, and I think that is the most important. And I would like to encourage colleagues to do so. Go on, continue your work. Even though obviously I also am a documentarist, and shooting a documentary film now is a huge challenge, obviously. Let me mention one more thing. This strategy of keeping on the good work is extremely good also in my professional field, because we've seen that the projects, there are some projects that just didn't work and some that are very successful. My colleagues started a project called Knihex a few years ago, and they decided to set up a new platform whose objective would be to create a networking group, a structure which would reinforce the role of us involved in the field, to strengthen our voice, to develop a long-term strategy too. And this is what they created. It is really a long-term project which was launched recently, and this is a great opportunity for professionals in the field to meet. We also decided to unite and support the sales of books. We also decided to support booksellers and bookshops, because all actors in this field are interconnected and we rely upon one another and we need to support one another. So I think the pandemic has shown the importance of mutual discussions. I recently had a seminar, a lecture on the notion of bibliodiversity. I met some colleagues. We discussed about the prospects of our profession, and it is a great source of inspiration. Furthermore, our Minister of Culture declared that he is well aware of the difference between business and culture, because in the literary world, business is strongly present. What is great, on the other hand, is that small projects started to be supported. The current minister met my colleagues from small publishing houses, invited them to take part in the discussion, and I think it is a great sign for future recognition of our sector. We started to cooperate with international festivals, theater too. I think this is really positive, a really positive change and strategy I will continue, I will pursue in the future. Very well, Bara. Thank you very much for your answer. And now, Gosia, tell us about your adaptation tactics, reserves, and ways to do things differently.
Well, I hope all the adaptation techniques will not be, I would hope they would not be necessary for very long, but I feel like, yeah, it will probably take a while to find the right way of doing things. But yeah, I feel like there is several aspects that we've noticed in our music community that has definitely changed. And the fact that musicians, like in the middle of the lockdown in March and April, have started connecting with the audience by doing those never-ending streams from bedroom. And I think we've been swamped with the overload of content that people were producing and needed to produce and share to find this feeling of connection with the audience and with the colleagues and the community. And I feel that this need will not disappear. So we'll still need to build the connection with our audience in some way. But the question is, I feel like the technology is still at the very basic level, like the fact, especially coming from like music background and looking, and club music especially has been a huge part of Unsound over the years. So I feel like that this is the part that is really hard to it is really hard to replace that experience of collectively dancing and enjoying music together. And I don't feel that any stream to your home will replace that experience, this collective experience of sharing the feelings of appreciation to the music or dancing together. And I feel that this is very hard. And I mean, I can totally imagine that in a few years we'll all be wearing VR sets and dancing to some inside virtual realities. But at the same time, I feel like at the moment we're not there yet, so having the experience of playing club music on computer speakers will not be the same. So when planning our festival this year, we were thinking, what is there that we can do? Which artists? Who are the people that actually use virtual reality in a way that creates interesting narratives, but also use the tools that they're familiar with. So, for example, we've invited quite a few artists that are known for creating virtual worlds or like visual works that can host also musicians. So we've had a few projects that were kind of almost like a game. You could go inside and experience music. For example, through this Taiwanese group we work with, they called Nax Corp. They've created this beautiful meta space that was called Afterlife, and it was like a kind of space where you could see few levels of your life. It was based of your afterlife. It was based on the Tibetan beliefs and Buddhist beliefs, and it was a very beautiful way of putting this composition into this virtual world where artists were also performing. So there was like a whole program of performances that you could access by getting inside the virtual world. But also you could, if you are not tech savvy, you probably can also watch it as a YouTube stream. So, but all of those elements, they require certain skill and access to technology and certain competences. So I feel that by creating this kind of virtual festivals, we also are facing like potential lack of or loss of audience from the people, especially older or very young people that can't access this ways of communication. So I feel like we need to still find ways of building the connection with different demographics. And while Unsound is usually like a festival that's created for people that probably are able to use those technologies, I also feel that this is the big challenge. What we'll do if we will not be able to meet in a physical space, and how do we involve different communities and people of different age groups, especially into cultural events? Because I feel like everyone needs that. People need to feel culture, and I feel like that during the hardest lockdown, the culture was the thing that helped us survive it, like all the films on Netflix or books or music at home. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential for artists and technology developers, investors to find ways of building tools that we'll be able to use and to access culture in different ways, and not only music or club music as such. But yeah, in terms of the concern, I feel like, yeah, technology is one thing, but the other thing is also money and funding, and how will the organizations like ours survive in this harsh reality? Because I was watching the film and I was quite surprised by people's responses, thinking, oh, they can spend the money. I think money is still quite a big barrier in accessing culture and being able to attend events, especially like I feel like there's quite a lot of people that feel like they might not have access to technology to access events online, or in the past they couldn't travel around to take part in big commercial festivals. So I feel like that this is still quite an obstacle for many people to access culture. And I feel that the crisis and the pandemic will heighten those disparitions in our society. So I wouldn't be, yeah, I mean, I'm not very optimistic. I want to believe that this will definitely change for the better, but I also feel that a lot of people will face lots of challenges, and this will be also probably a problem that lots of our artists will feel. I personally know quite a lot of people that have been making money. The art and music was their main profession, but sadly they have to look for other sources of income while the live performances are not possible in the way they were. So there will definitely be a lot of challenges, and I feel that this is where the governments, local or national, would have to look for ways of supporting this community.
Já moc děkuju.
Yes, thank you.
Obracím se na Jana
Thank you. I would like to now speak to Jan, who is here to represent a big public organization. I would like to ask you, what do you think your role as an institution is? What role can you play? How can you support the independent world, the independent artist, the individual artist, and this whole ecosystem? Because, of course, all of them are interconnected, and there are strong links, strong networks, there is new content being created. And I think that the world of public institutions should not be left aside. Well, I will try to speak not only on behalf of our Moravian Gallery, but also on behalf of other state-funded organizations. I think that the important thing is for us to be able to adapt to the new realities, the new conditions, and to be more flexible. To give you an example, it is not worth it to continue in what we used to do, or what the Moravian Gallery actually didn't do very often. But it is not useful to continue giving big events, big exhibitions, and only postpone them. We decided to create a program so that we don't suffer big losses. And we were lucky because I saw that other organizations had big losses. So we managed not really to be in the red numbers, which happened to many big projects. It is important to be able to organize them, reschedule them, and to be able to cope with that. Sometimes if you have a big exhibition or a big event, you have to make it longer to give the visitors the opportunity to visit it eventually. Because probably when the situation gets better, their first idea won't be to go visit the exhibition. Maybe they will only find time later. So this is a matter that needs time. And the institutions need resources. They should kind of have these resources and invest them back in the field of culture. In our case, this was investing our funds into new acquisitions, buying new art pieces, and supporting artists and designers. And I don't think this is a concept that would be limited to our institution, which was funded with this goal. But I think this can apply also to history museums or geographical museums. This doesn't need to be only artists. You don't need to have agencies that will digitalize the content, but you can also involve the artists who could digitalize it. And they could also be working in the field of archaeology, in the field of natural sciences. So the artists should participate in within different fields. For example, our gallery has been hiring or including artists, illustrators, photographers in our exhibition projects. So we want to have a wider portfolio of our collaborators. And we don't only want to give work to big agencies who would kind of do the whole package, the whole exhibition. We want to involve people from different sectors. So I think this is a step that an institution can take. Also, it can look at new topics. For example, we have now an exhibition on the Czech artists group Rafani. And we again included many people in the project. For example, they not only have an authorial exhibition, but they also created a program for children visitors. They also created a castle where the children can jump and play. So they have a new field of work. They have new activities that they can offer, not only within the exhibition space. They can also offer other programs. And this, I think, could be applicable to other institutions, other museums, not only in the field of fine arts. Thank you. Maybe we are lacking a person from performing arts. Of course, Gosia is here, and she's from the background of live music, but we haven't mentioned theaters, small theater groups, and so on. Also, we haven't mentioned the dance theaters, dancers, and their situation is really difficult. It will be really difficult for them to adapt, to find a strategy to be able to continue their work, because they are, again, really dependent on technologies that will help them. But of course, we can be unhappy, but that won't help. So maybe let's now be optimistic, or let's now be realistic. This will be helpful. We should be working with what we have at our disposal. So now let's look at the future. What priorities do you see? What fields do you think you should invest your energy in? How to work? What the role of the state is? And I think that we have seen that if the culture only is a standalone field and doesn't cooperate with other actors, I don't think this will work in the long-term horizon. I think that we should be seeing more cooperation across many sectors: the health sector, local development, the cultural and creative industry. This is a phrase that has been around for decades, but only now it is being more deeply discussed. And maybe it could offer us important and functioning processes that won't only help culture, because of course we don't only need to save culture, we need to save many fields. And I think that if we cooperate, we will be more developed, more cultivated, and the overall level of our work will be better. So I would like to ask you, what do you think the municipalities and the state should do? What is their role? Okay, I will start again. I will stick to the order. I would like to say that when I asked myself why I actually write and publish books, I realized that the culture has a fantastic power. It can open up topics that are really difficult to understand, but in this form they are open to a broad public. I often choose topics that are taboo, and I think in this form I can open up a debate, maybe show the public another perspective. For example, if they see that I am a successful 30-year-old woman, of course, I probably will have a different opinion, a different stand than a homeless person, than a mother who is alone in raising children. And before getting to your question, I would also like to pick up on what Jan Press said. I love it when the public institutions get involved in important things, in acquisitions of art pieces. I was very pleasantly surprised by what happened in the city of Prague. There is one of the municipal council members, Hanna Třeštíková. She cooperated with the Library of Prague, and we were asked as a publishing house, and they bought books directly from us, which for me was very important. I think this is a proof that institutions can cooperate directly with other, for example, publishing houses. And now to your questions. I have a small note here, which is education, because I think many people don't really realize what the culture is. And it is all around, right? And maybe during the pandemic, people realized what the culture really represents to them and how important it is that it can save us. For example, if you see a person who normally works in the field of culture and now they are asked to start working manually, maybe on construction sites and so on, I don't think this is quite logical, because if they work in their jobs, in their field, they will do miracles that are way beyond what they would do if they only did manual works. And also a connected question: what is the value of culture? What is the price of culture? For example, people often look at the price of a book, how much they spend on a book, but if they want to buy a cheaper book, maybe half price, they don't realize that they actually make the translator or the author work for half the price, which would be proper for them. So actually, this is strongly connected. And the third point I noted down, the grant policy, the subsidies policy. I think there should be changes in this. In March, there was a first round of a debate, which finally started, and I'm really glad it did. For example, in the Czech Republic, it wasn't possible to apply for subsidies in the field of science fiction and many other fields that are completely common and popular everywhere around the globe, but here you couldn't just get subsidies for these genres. Now this is slowly starting to change. And also the question of remuneration of money that the authors receive is now being opened up. I think that a long time we haven't seen the budget for culture improved. It is the way it is, or it has been the way it is for 20 years, so it needs to be changed. And one last note. I would love to see the officials focus more on the real operation of the cultural industry. Maybe directly look at a publishing house and how it works, directly look at an artist, what he or she does when he or she receives a subsidy. And now the artists cannot travel abroad. Maybe let's grant them some residency programs in the Czech Republic. Let's look at ways of help. Now I see that there are e-shops in the Czech Republic, parasitic ones, because they send books with big discounts even before the books are actually published. So why not have a closer look at this system, at these shadow e-shops, and at what they cause? Because if a person sees it, maybe then they will be ready to change the law. Not only to listen to the big lobby, but really have a look at what really happens. Have a look at a person who proofreads books for laughable sums of money. Thank you for these important notes. We only have 5 minutes, so let's move on.
Please, you can take the floor.
Role státu, role
The
municipalit.
role of state and municipalities.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
What is the role of the state and municipalities in culture?
Well, I think the state and municipalities have a huge responsibility of taking care of all of those cultural workers that will just and are facing all the challenges and difficulties that pandemic has forced. I mean, the culture has been quite underfunded, especially the independent artists, and obviously in Poland we probably have a bit different challenges when it comes to the things like the recognition or the status of artists as a and for example social security connected with that, and issues like that that have arisen like also these days during the pandemic, where lots of people without like all these freelance jobs have suddenly found themselves unemployed or without the health insurance. And I think this is like the biggest challenge, and also an opportunity for the governments to fix the mistakes and to look for solutions, how to kind of take care of this community of people working in the arts and culture who have been without like this kind of temporary freelance unpredictable jobs. With the thriving economy, it was possible to sustain, and it was possible to travel, get extra jobs and so on. But I feel like that this pandemic has shown that this instability can no longer last, and I feel that the state has to take care of all these people. And it's true of Poland, and it's probably true of most of the countries. And and I'll be curious to see if that will really happen. But I was just recently reading reading a report on culture that was commissioned by one festival in Krakow, and that was strictly about Polish culture and different aspects of it. But what struck me there was the proportion also of culture of people that work in culture sector in Poland. It's over 300,000 people who are hired and work full time in different fields of culture, and at the same time, this generates 3.2 of the gross national income. Well, for example, just it's like, and it sounds completely demagogical, but like the car industry, it's 120,000 people, and the subsidies that this industry gets in Poland alone, it's just gigantic compared to the culture funding, which doesn't even take 1% of the overall budget of the country. So yeah, those numbers are quite shocking. When I heard them, I was quite surprised. Also considering how much of the value or the brand value of the country and worth culture actually brings to it. So I feel that with overall not such a huge expense, the culture can really be saved, and lots of people could have a much better future if the governments rethink these strategies. Also, like for example, coming from a city like Krakow, which is dependent on tourism and was like really relying on foreign tourists, I feel like that this is the time when the cities have to rethink these strategies and look into local communities, local artists and institutions that have been building the city as it was welcoming to the people from abroad, but now look a bit more to the local communities and people that inhabit those places. So I know we're running out of time, so yeah, I'll let Jan take over.
Nemáte, Gošo, děkuju. Já děkuju za zmínku.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gosia, for mentioning the artist's status, because it is also an acute topic in the Czech Republic. Thank you very much for all these interesting thoughts. But now, Jan, please, you have the floor.
Budeme rádi, když vás budeme slyšet, Jane.
Please turn on your mic.
Odmutovat.
Ano.
Jo.
Tak já
Yes.
s tím, co bylo teďka.
I entirely agree. I think that the states and municipalities' role must adapt, must be strengthened. If we want to call ourselves a cultural country, the state has to get involved. It is an immense power to change things. In the summer, I visited Paris, and we attended an exposition about by Christo, and that exhibition was made possible by the state because the exhibition consisted in covering monuments such as Arc de Triomphe and others. And it was clear that this exhibition, which was a real world phenomenon, could only be possible thanks to the state's involvement. And this given event really influenced the whole world. And this clearly shows that the state's involvement is crucial. The current Minister of Culture and Ministry of Industry do know that they are well aware of the power of culture. I would also like to appreciate the city of Prague's involvement in culture. It is trying to support through grants many very good cultural events, and it really makes me happy. I think it is a very responsible approach. I would also like to react on what Bára said, talking about the role of small publishers and their position, which is incredibly difficult. And they must be distinguished from the large publishing players whose work is really profoundly different. And while the work of small publishing houses is very different in ensuring diversity, the truth is that the existence of those small publishing houses shapes Czech culture. I personally know how much money the whole distributorship process consumes. And I really also know how low fares are paid to translators and proofreaders. It is definitely a big topic. Also, author royalties are a big issue. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jan. I think that to begin with, we should stop talking about grants and we should start talking about investment in culture that will be rentable. I think we could go on for hours talking about this topic, opening up different topics. But now I will thank to all of you, Gosia, Bára, Jan. Thank you very much for your interesting thoughts. Thank you in general for being active, a great source of inspiration. And thank you for having hope and inspiration. Thank you.
Very much.
Loučím se s posluchači, s diváky Inspiračního fóra.
Good evening to all our viewers. This is the very end of the Inspiration Forum debate,